Oh, this feels better. So we're off to deliver this BMW car cake to our BMW dealer, and the reason I made this cake was because my husband wanted an upgrade on this car with tinted glasses in the back. So instead of paying for it, they asked for me to make a cake, and I'm delivering it right now, and I'm so excited to see their reaction because they don't know what I made, and it is actually our car. A 3D car cake of our car. So I hope they like it, and I can't wait to see the reaction. Woo, excited! So that went by very fast. I couldn't even film their reaction, but they were so surprised and amazed, and they absolutely loved the car cake. And without further ado, let's hop into the tutorial. So before I can start carving the cake into the right shape, we need to prep the templates. I got this magazine from my BMW dealer, and it has the perfect blueprint on the inside. I scanned the image and I enlarged it to the right size that I wanted in Microsoft Word. But first of all, I changed the printer settings to be horizontally so I have a wider page. And then I just enlarged the image and copy and pasted it onto 4 different pages. So I have the side, the top, the front, and the back. And then I laminated all 4 pages so they were reusable and I could use them throughout the whole process, and they won't be ruined by any grease stains from the buttercream. So I'm cutting the template into the right shape, and I'm removing the bottom part of the wheels right now because we just need the general shape at this stage. We're going to address the wheels later on. And then I'm flipping through the pages of the magazine to see where there are any indents on the car that I need to address. And then I cut a slit through the template so I can transfer those indents on the right spots in my cake. So now I'm using the template of the top view to cut the cake into the right width and length, and then we're going to fill it onto a Wilton cake circle. And it's important to use the corrugated cardboard for this tutorial, and I'll show you why in a later stage. It's easier to use a corrugated cardboard that leaves a bit of space to the front, back, and sides of your template. It will just make your life easier. It's easier to carve the cake. There's no cardboard that gets in the way when you crumb coat the cake. It just do what I say. So my first cake layer is on the cake board, and I'm spreading my buttercream filling. And if you also have a small piece of cake on one side, just place your other small piece on the opposite side of your cake, or else you will have one side of the cake that is less stable. When my second layer of buttercream is smoothly spread out, I took my template of the side view to see where I should place the third layer of cake to match the roof of the car. And now your cake needs to chill in the fridge for about an hour before we carve it. So the cake has been chilling for about an hour, and I'm using the side template to carve the cake into shape first. And I'm cutting a slit through the middle of the cake so I don't end up with slanted cuts. And I'm carving the right shape of the car first and then the left side. And if I did a good job, both cuts will need to match up. Just flip the template to create the other side, and make sure that you line it up with the first side that you've cut so it will all match up. So the side of the cake is carved for now, and we're moving on to the top of the cake. I'm just sticking my template with a bit of buttercream onto my cake, and then I'm carving the outline of the template. While I'm carving the outline of the cake, I'm also carving a bit of cake from the bottom to make it more rounded. At this stage, we're going to use those slits that we cut into the template earlier on in the tutorial, and we're matching the top and the side template because the roof gets narrower on top. And this is the window part that we're going to cut, and this makes the shape of the car look more realistic. So as you can see, I cut a slit through the top of the cake and the side of the cake, and I'm matching both lines up. So the side needs to match the top line, and then I cut it into a slant. And now you'll need to repeat the same steps for the hood of the car. This carving is so nerve-wracking, you guys. When I was editing the video, I could see myself hesitating because you can always carve more, but if you carve too much, it's harder to put cake back into the right place because it's not stable anymore. But yeah, we're moving on to the front part of the cake where the bumper needs to be, and then we're addressing the back part of the cake where the bumper is and the license plate. And it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage because we're going to crumb coat the cake and let it solidify in the fridge, and then it's easier to make some perfect cuts and perfect the shape of this cake to make it look more realistic and make it really look like a BMW 3D car cake. So having said that, it was time to clean off my cake board from all those crumbs from carving, and I placed a bit of buttercream on the sides of the cake. And I didn't put buttercream on the raised part of the hood because I was afraid I would lose those carved lines that I made. And then I used a palette knife to smooth the buttercream to the shape of the car as smoothly as I could at this stage. I also used a cake scraper to scrape off the excess buttercream to make longer and sleeker lines on this cake. And I used a palette knife with a pointed edge and a rounded edge to get in all those nooks and crannies. So this is the shape of the car cake right now. It's just a rough shape. It's not there yet. It's not smooth enough yet, but the buttercream layer needs to solidify right now, preferably overnight. And that's day one. I was done. It took me forever to get to this stage. I know this tutorial looks fast, but it really isn't. So yeah, we're coming back to day two. So I'm coming back to the side template and I'm correcting the shape of the hood and of the roof, and I'm cutting an indent into the side of the cake where the door is at, and I'm using those slits again that I made into the side template to create it on the right spot. I'm also correcting the lines with the top template, and I'm making the window part more rounded. As you can see in this frame, you can see that the left side is more rounded than the right side. So just repeat that. I have to admit, I was so freakishly nervous while making this cake. There were so many times I wanted to put my cake scraper down, my palette knife down, my fondant roller down, because at this stage it wasn't looking like the real thing, and I was making this cake for the company BMW itself, so I had to nail it and it had to look perfect. And yeah, I was super nervous, but I never gave up. I just stuck to it, even though I procrastinated a few times. And yeah, I'm happy with the end result. So I hope you're enjoying this tutorial, and just keep on watching. So after I was happy with the shape after my second carving, I lightly crumb coated the cake again with all those exposed cake parts, and I didn't bother covering it up completely and not seeing any cake because I was going to put some black fondant on it. If you're using white fondant, make sure that you don't see any cake, or else it will peek through your fondant and it will just ruin the look. So while your cake is chilling in the fridge, let's start making some decorations for this cake. I started making the wheels with black gum paste. I used a round cookie cutter in the same diameter as the wheels of the template, and I measured the width of the wheels and I rolled my gum paste into the same thickness. And then I just cut 4 circles, and I used a ribbon cutter to indent some lines and to create some details on the side of the wheels. And I used an edible image of the rims of the wheels and place it on top of my circles with some piping gel. I used the same black gum paste to create the mirrors for this cake. I rolled 2 gum paste balls that have roughly the same size, and then I shaped it using my fingers and using the template as a reference. And I inserted a toothpick into the mirror, and then I used a Dresden tool to create some indents that resemble the indents that are on the actual mirror. So now it's time to cut the cardboard, and this is why you need a corrugated cardboard because it's easier to slice through. And I'm using a very large serrated knife to carve the cardboard exactly around the shape of the cake. I moved it on the side of my bench so it was easier to move my serrated knife around it. Whoops, I'm going faster than I'm talking. So we're moving on to the fondant part of the cake. I rolled out some black fondant and draped it over my cake, and then I quickly shaped it with my hands so that it will stick onto the buttercream of the cake. And then I used a Dresden tool to accentuate all the indents that are on the car. Don't cut away all the excess fondant so closely to the cake at this stage. Just leave a bit of space and just work on all your indents with your Dresden tool and focus on that before your fondant starts to dry and crack. To make a cleaner cut around the bottom of your car cake, you can raise your entire cake with the cut cake board underneath it and put it on a baking pan and use a sharp craft knife to cut away the excess fondant. And then you can smooth down the bottom with a fondant smoother and transfer it back to that round cake board and tuck in the edges at the bottom with a cake scraper. And then we're moving on to make some more details. So now we're just accentuating every part of the cake. We're accentuating the hood, the bumper, and I'm using a Dresden tool to really deepen those lines that are in the actual car. As you can see, I'm cutting the template. This is where the hood opens, and I'm creating that line with the back side of my knife, so it's a blunt cut and not a cut straight through my fondant. So just continue this process of cutting up your template and just making all those lines onto your cake in the right places. And I also refer to the magazine that I got and flipped through the pages of all the cars, so I made sure that I made cuts that were supposed to be there, because there are a lot of lines on this template, as you can see, but not all of them resemble the lines that are actually on the car. To make those tiny circles at the back side of the car, I used a really small piping tip. I think it's Wilton number 1. I don't know what these tiny circles are, but they're there, so they need to be made onto the cake. So now I'm moving on to creating the lines for the doors. I started with the back door and I cut it from my template, and I scored the line into my fondant, and then I moved to the other side before I cut away the template to create the lines of the front doors. So now I'm going to cut away the excess cake where the wheels need to be. I printed out a new template because, as you saw, my previous template was all cut up, and I placed the template in the right position on the side of the cake so the wheels are where they need to be. And then I first cut away the fondant, and then I moved the cake to the side of my bench and used a serrated knife to cut into that corrugated cardboard first, so I could create a space where the wheels need to fit in, and then I remove the excess cake. To raise the cake into the right height, I measured how high the wheels are underneath the cake using the template as a reference, and then I made a rectangle shape out of corrugated cardboard in this height and wrapped it in black adhesive film and glued this onto my final presentation board with a hot glue gun. I applied some buttercream into the holes where the wheels need to fit in, and then I attached the gum paste wheels I made earlier into this space. So here's where I went completely cheat mode. I printed the images of the sides, front and back of the car, and I cut away the windows and the lightings. And I did this because our car is black and you can't really paint on black cake, not really visibly anyway. So I decided to use printed images to make it more lifelike. By the way, these images are of course edible. I printed them on some frosting sheet with an edible printer. If you don't have an edible printer yourself, you can choose to paint on the details, or you can let a cake shop print these images for you. So now I'm painting the trim around the windows with some silver edible luster dust mixed with food grade alcohol, and I formed it into a paste I can paint with. And I actually had to text my husband if we have the silver trim in our car, because some cars have a black trim, I believe, and I think the silver trim is a sport mode version. Anyway, moving on to the brake light, I formed a rope of red fondant and I darkened it with some edible dust, and it's in the color claret. For the trim on the top of the cake, I made 2 fondant black ropes and cut it into a slant on either side to make a sleek look. And then I attach it onto the cake with some water. I also used a dressing tool to make sure that these ropes were straight, because there are no crooked lines on a car. I painted the inside of the mirrors with the same silver luster dust I used for the trim around the windows, and I inserted them in the right position. And then I made the door handles out of a rope of black fondant as well, and I inserted them into the indents I made earlier. And then I painted some more details with silver edible luster dust. I dipped a small round piping tip into the silver luster dust as well to create 2 exhausts. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, make sure to subscribe to this channel. I upload a new video every Thursday, and don't forget to click that notification bell to be notified as soon as I've uploaded a new video for you guys. See you next time. Mwah!